Welcome to Automotive EV. My name is Peter Wooding and thank you for joining us. I'm joined today by ACHIM Glass, DMITRY KULISH and Martin Volg, who will be delivering episode 1 of our latest battery supply chain series. Before we begin, if you've recently joined the community, or as a reminder, do not forget that you can connect with other members directly, privately, and constantly throughout your membership on this website. Also, should you miss any episode, you can watch it on our on-demand section. Currently, there are around 100 sessions available for you to watch on catch-up. Now, on the build-up to this particular episode, we've been running a poll. I know the result, but our panel members don't yet. So if you don't mind, guys, you're going to actually hear it at the same time as everybody else. Interesting enough, if you, during this session, it wasn't your particular thought, then readdress at question time with the panel so you can get their views on the other areas that were covered. So the results are, in actual fact, the most popular, if I want to call it popular as being the right word, was increased transport costs was the biggest fear, with 49% of the overall votes. Running second to that, with 33% of the votes, was the unreliability of arrival times, followed by poor shipment visibility, and finally the lack of equipment and space. So quite an interesting thought, and also a good way to actually build ourselves into the session. Now, before I hand over, ACHIM, where are you today?
Hello, Peter. Thanks for asking. I'm actually in Gothenburg, Sweden today, which undoubtedly is one of the epicenters for drive electrification here in Europe.
Excellent. Well, enjoy your time there. DMITRY is most probably facing the beginning of cold weather. Martin's in Germany, and I'm, as usual, tucked away over here in London. So without further ado, ACHIM, thank you for agreeing to moderate the session. And I have great pleasure in handing over to you to introduce DMITRY and Martin. And I look forward to the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And good morning to all our listeners and watchers in America and the Americas. Good afternoon to Europe, and also a very warm welcome to all our community members joining us from Asia Pacific today. The recent incident in the Suez Canal is probably still very vivid in the majority of people's minds, where a giant container vessel was actually blocking the canal, one of the biggest and most important trade routes between connecting Asia and Europe. And we have seen the implications with unwanted production downtime at OEMs around the world. And also we saw significant delays in delivery of service parts to the dealerships. And this one single incident actually showed us how very vulnerable our international supply chains are. And the objective of the session here today is to give all of you guys out there an update of what is happening in the international Seafreight market and in the international Airfreight market, with particular emphasis of what does it mean for automotive supply chains. Therefore, I had the pleasure of inviting two of my industry friends that know, like nobody else in the market, what is happening in global sea freight and in global air freight. So Martin Volg from Kuehne Nagel, who happens to be my colleague for the past 22 years, always have been working in the Seafreight organization. I will hand over to Martin momentarily. And DMITRY KULISH from Volga-Dnepr Group, And I've been working together with DMITRY for the past 5 years now on multiple projects, and we are also members in joint industry associations. So I'm happy that I have these two industry experts with me today. And I would like to hand over to DMITRY first. DMITRY, if you will be so kind and introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, ACHIM. My name is DMITRY KULISH. I'm broadcasting from Moscow. As Peter just said, the winter is coming to this part of the world. So I'm director for high-tech and automotive industry in Volga-Dnepr Group. I'm working for the company for 7 years. For Volga-Dnepr Group is basically, for, well, everybody's understanding, is the group of all cargo airlines. We have more than 3 decades of the relative experience and expertise in terms of the air transportation. The group consists of 3 independent airlines. That's Volga-Dnepr Airlines, which main focus is the charter business, and we have Airbridge Cargo, which mostly working for the scheduled cargo operations, and we have Etran Airlines that is working in express segment. So as the group, we also have additional supporting businesses related to the air freight with MRO, with trucking in Russia, and with insurance. So we've been delivering a great expertise and logistics for more than 30 years. And under the group command, we have more than 40 aircraft. As for the automotive, we have quite an experience and expertise. So we have been working with the industry for quite a while. And we have been working with the huge trucks, with the full charter flights of the sport cars, with the hybrids, with prototypes. Not to mention, of course, the transportation of the huge oversized equipment and assembly lines, for example, for production of the vehicles. And not to forget, of course, about the regular traffic of the spare parts that we move throughout the continents and countries. So we came a long path on the excellence of the logistics for the automotive. So that's maybe for the short introduction from my side. Then maybe over to Martin.
Good afternoon. My name is Martin Ferg. I'm now more than 30 years in this industry already. I worked in various jobs and in various countries, but always in Seafreight and always with Nagel. These days, I'm the Seafreight Operation Manager Europe, and main milestones in my career so far had been to work as a Seafreight Director in Poland, as a VP for global pricing, tender pricing. So from a lot of automotive supplier, I handled the 6, 7, 8 rounds of tender per year. And I also worked as trade manager. It was very exciting because I had to deal directly with the shipping lines and negotiated the rates and the space with them for the coming year. So far, to me, I'm looking now forward to the session.
Okay. Thank you both for the introduction. I would like again to invite the audience, whenever you have questions, please send them to us in the chat function and we will pick them up immediately and we will make sure that we will address all of your questions. The way how I would like to structure today's session is as follows. I will continue by asking my esteemed industry friends a couple of questions. First, around the industry in general. What is happening in general in global sea freight and in global air freight? Before we will go to the second part of the session. We will discuss the implications on automotive supply chain. And eventually, towards the end of this session, we will ask DMITRY and Martin about an outlook. How do they see the market develop until the end of this year? So my first question, actually, Martin, goes back to you. The overall market, I understand, changed fundamentally, but what actually happened in the global sea freight market over the past couple of years? And why are we in such a distress and bad situation today?
Well, that's of course a quite complex question, Achim, but let me try to summarize. And we not only need to think about COVID, we also need to go back to the past couple of years. And there, most of the shippers enjoyed really low ocean freight rates. And the downside was that these ocean freight was not always cost covering. So there was a very high cost pressure on the carrier. And this had several impacts. For example, they always kept the investments for the equipment to an absolute minimum. And we have also seen, and we should not forget that some carriers even had to leave the market, yes, like Hanshin. And at the same time, we have seen that these large alliances have shown up. And I can rest assure you that I believe that, for example, to MSC and Maersk, this was not pure love, but this was more driven by cost reasons, because it's much easier for the shipping lines if they operate a new loop, a new service jointly, so that they can share the costs. And this had then the impact that we had less alliances, less carrier, and a much better visibility for the carrier over the market. And suddenly we did not have all these overcapacities, which we were used to have. And shipping, when you have a lot of overcapacities, is much easier. Suddenly the carrier started to control the allocation much better. But all these cost cutting measures were still running. And now when the supply chain was hit by COVID, by weather, by certain incidents, we saw how fragile this is.
Okay, so besides COVID, I heard the port closures, in particular in southern China. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, we have, of course, overall, and when we see the present situation, it's somehow caused by the trade from Asia to the US. And there we have, on the one side, in Asia, we had terminal closures only caused by one COVID case. And at the same time, we have heavy congestion in the US. So this is really a trade which has a big impact now on global shipping, because when on the origin side, the ports are closed, and when on the destination side, the infrastructure is heavily congested, yes, this leads to all the impact we are now seeing.
Okay, so I understand the market dynamics, and I also understand that there have been consolidations, but why are the vessels late?
Well, it finally, the weather. Yes, we just had a typhoon. This, as a result of this typhoon, ports were closed. Yes, we had a hurricane in the US, ports were closed, and then vessels are laying up in front of the port. So I checked this morning a Sea Explorer, and in front of Long Beach, Los Angeles, again, there were close to 40 vessels, I believe, waiting to berth. And they're waiting to 10 days, 14 days that they have the berths and they can berth, because the ports are simply not big enough. And the vessels have become bigger and bigger and bigger. And this was causing all the issues in the ports. We do not have enough truck drivers. We do not have enough chassis. The vessels are waiting outside. And all this, and this was just announced yesterday, all this is summing up on this trade lane from Asia to US West Coast to a capacity reduction of close to 25%. So 25%, 1/4 of the entire allocation, is taken away, caused by these port congestion.
Okay, all right, I understand. Martin, thank you for this generic overview. Dimitri, over to you. How is the situation in the global air freight market? Is everything rosy, or do we have similar capacity constraints?
Yeah, I think the situation is quite similar in air freight as in the sea freight. So just to give you a better overview, is that saying before the COVID, 50% of the all air freight movement was actually delivered by the passenger airlines. So COVID actually changed everything. So with the most of the passenger airplane grounded, so we see there is a lack of capacity on the market, and we see that all freighter airlines used to be some of the ad hoc or urgent solutions. Now we see that all freighter airlines is the main source of keeping your supply chain going. So basically we're still flying to the ports where the passenger airlines is not flying. That's why we see this strong demand of the capacity. And we see that the trend is going to continue. We also see that some of the passenger airlines wanted to have so-called freighters. So they actually converted passenger airlines and started to carry cargo. But that's actually not as efficient as as working with the all freighter, because of the loading system, because of the management and the manpower, etc. If we look at the overall, say, forecast for the future, so we see that also the passenger airlines are coming back only on a domestic level, not for the international, because during different countries' legislation, so the countries are not welcoming any new disease cases. That's number one. And number two is I think business travelers have actually playing a huge role in that. So we see that the business travelers are not coming back to the air as soon as we actually expected. That's actually driving the huge, say, decrease in terms of the demand from the passengers. And now we may even consider, they say, for when the COVID will actually change, the question is whether all the business travelers will come back to the where they were. And if they don't, so basically the passenger airlines will need to look at their network and to see how to optimize it better to basically choose the right origins and destinations. And we might come to the world where the all cargo and the passenger airlines network are not aligned and quite different from one of another. So that's basically the market overview right now. So it's more about the demand and supply.
Okay, you mentioned a terminology which I only heard for the first time a couple of weeks ago, freighters. So freighters is what I understand a combination between passenger aircraft and freighters. So somebody had the glorious idea to call them freighters. And you said that those freighters are not as efficient. Why? I mean, why are freighters in service, and why is the loading, for example, different and more strenuous compared to loading cargo aircraft only?
Well, there are a few things how you actually can look at that. So usually we have different types of the freighters. So you have just the passenger aircraft, and I believe people saw pictures in the internet when we have the boxes put on the passengers' chairs. So basically you cannot allocate too much cargo of that. And in order to do that, you need to have quite manpower to basically distribute that. And the loading, unloading hours will require much of the manpower, much of the time. So it's not systematic. And I mean, if we're talking about the all cargo, you're using the freighters, you'll not be able to load some of the big shipments. For example, you cannot allow the SUV, for example, in the freighters. So they actually flying because there is a need to be flying. So there is an emergency in demand. That's why some of the companies and airlines coming to these concrete measures to basically at least to deliver something. And the maximum, I think, takeoff mass is much lower than the freighters.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so my simple math that we can use all these idle passenger aircrafts which are parked somewhere at the airports and convert them over to freight cargo aircraft is not working properly, I understand. But what impact does this have on global rates? You know, as I understand, there's a shortage on capacity as well. And can you elaborate on rates a little bit, Dimitri? Because Peter mentioned that rates is very high up there on the agenda. People are ranking high their concerns about rates. Let's not talk about the outlook. Let's talk about rates right now. Where are rates today compared to where have they been before COVID? First question to you, Dimitri, and then I will ask the same question to Martin. Martin, then the question will be good to you. Can you elaborate on the rate situation, since this was voted as #1 concern for the audience?
Well, thank you. I think it's a great question, and I think that's actually requires to have an answer for that. And the pure and simple answer that the rates are actually rising up, because as I said, the demand is there, the supply is not there yet. And we actually saw that by the freight indexes, so the maximum was reached in May this year. For example, from the lane from Asia to Europe, where the most of the automotive flows is going. So we see that, say, a couple years ago, it will be the rate will be 1.7, 1.8 US dollars per kilo, but during the May, it's actually reached more than $5. And as we speak, so we actually saw that the rates declined a little bit during the summer season. However, September, October, November is traditionally a high season for airlines, because everybody's looking for the ways to deliver their presents before the Christmas. So we see a lot of the electronics launches, new products want to be make sure that they are delivered in time and delivered to a proper destination. And we see that the customers is actually buying out capacity massively. That's actually making capacity more scarce, and that's why it's actually driving the prices even more high. So as we speak, so the pricing from Asia to Europe is reaching up to $8, and that's not a limit, because we see the analysis forecast from the international digital platforms. They see that the growth is actually going with double digits. So that's not the limit. And to make things worse is actually, as Martin also mentioned, is that we still see some of the cases of the COVID. So, for example, it has a huge influence into the overall airport operations. So we see the other day that it was several cases in Shanghai airport. So basically all freighters stopped to operate to Shanghai. And in order to somehow save the situation, airport actually restrict to fly any freighters there. That's why only all cargo aircrafts flew there with a very limited amount because of the backlog. And the freight started to be distributed throughout the China, which makes situation, I think, in a more sadder way. So I don't have the, say, optimistic overview in terms of the pricing going down this year, at least.
Okay, last question to you, Dimitri, on the pricing subject. Now I forgot my question, actually. I was going to ask you, I forgot. I will come back to that later. Martin, over to you, Martin. Overall, the situation with regards to rates in the global sea freight market, how has this developed over the last 18, 12 months compared to today?
Yes. Of course, a tender season for next year is only starting right now. Yes, a very soft start. So we know more in October, November, but rates can be expected on a historical high, also the long-term rates. And of course, Achim, we should not forget, we always talk about the ocean freight, but at the same time, the US inland charges, for example, and the trucking charges around the globe have increased tremendously by a shortage of truck driver, shortage of equipment. And this we also need to consider, that there we have very high cost increases when we talk, for example, on transatlantic. And at the same time, we also touched the topic equipment shortage. So this means in return that a carrier will be far more restrictive again with the free times. So whenever you have extended need of the equipment, yes, you also have to pay for this. So for overall, costs will increase heavily.
Okay, but how were the costs before COVID and how are the costs now? Standard box on the Trans-Pacific, for example, or take whatever trade lane you like.
Let's say on transatlantic is to give you a number. Yes, only the ocean part times 4, times 5. Yes, compared to the good times and what can be expected, but this is at this stage a rough estimate, because what I would also like to point out, the old process which some companies had to really separate the procurement and the logistics might not work out, and to go over 6 tender rounds and to press the price. Yes, you must be really ensure that the carrier you choose, the supplier you are choosing can provide you with the equipment, with the space. So we also need to think in different directions because of all the hiccups in the supply chain we mentioned earlier.
Okay, so Martin, if I ask Kuehne Nagel for, or if I receive a quotation from Kuehne Nagel, and probably the same is applicable for other large international freight forwarding companies out there, I'm used to those days when the rate was valid for a year or for 2 years. And the customer, we sent the quotation to a customer today, and the customer had 30 days to say, I take the offer, I don't take the offer. Has that situation changed due to the new market conditions?
Yes, partly a validity for some quotes is only 5 days. So that we have a tender starting in November with final closure in April, this is not workable anymore.
Okay. I understand. Dimitri, I remember my question again. I was going to ask you, you mentioned that Volga-Dnepr Group, they have the 3 airlines and you have more than 40 birds in the air. Why don't you just, you and other cargo aircraft carriers, why don't you just buy these idle passenger aircrafts and add capacity to the market? Is this not something that can be done so that we can hopefully then see a relief on the rates? Maybe it's too simplistic, but I think it's a question which maybe many of us have on their minds right now.
I believe all stakeholders working in the Airfreight logistics looking to the different ways how to extend the capacity and how to do it more efficiently. But in order to do that, it's actually not just requires just to buy an airplane and start to operate that. That's basically a difficult machine to operate in terms of the cost, the efficiency, the fuel, the routing, and the pilots. So it's easier said than done. But anyway, I believe we as the company and our partners and the whole industry is looking at the ways how to basically optimize and actually bring more capacity to the market. So right now, as you see, so there is no clear solutions which way to go, which way we want to develop. We see that the freighters is not coming. There is like no new freighters coming to the markets any time soon, and we I believe still will be in a situation where the supply is still under the demand. So that's
okay.
That's how we see it.
You know, now that I think about it, probably also all those Airbuses and Boeings of this world who were building aircrafts, I think they are also in trouble probably, you know, and yes, this is okay. I do understand. You know, Martin said the validity of quotations in global sea freight is very short, from weeks to a couple of days. How's the situation in the spot air freight market? If I called, any customer is calling average cargo for a price, how long will this price be valid? So
for those, you know, ad hoc shipments, we actually have the validity for 1 week.
Okay.
Most of the time, but it also depends on the routing, on the destination, on the commodity. Because I mean, I said it last time, but I'll say it once again. So we're actually looking at the different commodities. We want to prioritize something that will bring actually more relief to humanity. So we actually, you know, focusing on the key industries for us. That's a healthcare. That's vaccine transportation and humanitarian cargo. So we definitely give the priority to that because we see there is a value to the society in that. Besides that, we also are looking for the development of the automotive and the high-tech industry, of course. So that's the price validity. I would say generally that's a 1 week, but it's also subject to discussion depending on the, say, multiple conditions and the overall outlook. Because if you are coming to us asking for a 3-year contract, that's going to be a different discussion with the different parts from our management involved.
Dimitri, I remember, I think you and I also spoke on Automotive EV earlier this year. And back then, we were just in the rollout of COVID vaccinations. You know, all the vaccine manufacturers now ramped up their production. And back then, we didn't know, or we were uncertain at least, about the impact which vaccination will have with regards to capacity and rates. Would you say that because of vaccinations, the rates went up? Or would you say the impact is rather mild because, I mean, vaccinations are so small, you know, it's very dense and small freights. You don't need billions and billions of tons of air freight for that.
I would say the expectation was that the vaccines will change the whole industry and we will not have capacity flying the regular cargo because of the vaccines. But what we see right now is that the vaccine production is mainly localized. So we see that this production bases actually pop up in the countries or near the countries where they're best served. So we see that a lot of the vaccines is actually moved by truck on the land. However, the overall pandemic situations, we still see the request for some of the vaccines transportation, as well as we see the overall healthcare industry is actually popping up with the different items, not purely related to COVID vaccines. So generally, we see the increase, but that's definitely not the increase that everybody forecasted a year ago.
Okay, so the impact was more mild than expected. Yeah. Okay, I understand. Question to both of you. Now that we covered the market, and I understand if I wanted to summarize, significant shortage on capacity means vessel capacity and cargo capacity on the planes, a shortage of containers, ports are closed because of COVID, people have to work, or can work with less people, less workforce actually to unload the containers. And we also spoke about the impact that rates went up. In both modes of transport. What are now the implications for automotive supply chains? Can you talk about, without mentioning names of organizations, but what has been the impact now on the supply chains for inbound material, for finished vehicles, for CKD, SKD, spare parts, service parts. Is there anything you can share with the audience? Question to both of you.
Maybe let me just to give my impression and the first look at the automotive. So usually automotive is well relying on the ocean freight, and they are using the air freight for the cases where the spare parts are urgently needed, or they're delivered from the other continents. So sometimes for small shipments, it's easier just to do the air freight instead of the ocean. We do see the logistics of the finished vehicles for different conferences, for trials, and for other events, for example. So as right now, I see that the demand from the automotive customers is actually growing in terms of the air freight. As Martin said, people are concerned about the delivery terms. So we see the customers knocking on our doors and complaining. They're saying, "Oh, we have a cargo stuck in this country, in that country. So we need to make sure that we deliver the spare parts, and we need to make sure that the assembly line is running." So in terms of the air freight, I would say I see a lot more requests from the automotive sector for the air freight this year, so to say. And I think as for the moving of the finished vehicles, we see less of the events related to the automotive, so the people are not gathering too much. So we have some of the slight decrease in that area.
Okay. Martin, Kuehne being a German company and being also the largest container sea freight forwarder in the world, and the German automotive industry being very strong, have you heard about any implications for the automotive industry? Some examples you like to give?
Well, implications are, of course, that automotive as well as other industry now try to lift up their stock. Yes, to have more stock, but as the warehouse capacities are not always given, partly the container is used for storage. And this is the worst idea, because this has a ripple effect, because then the container is not available. In the US, the chassis is blocked. And when you do not pick up the container from the port is congested. And this is, of course, also a scenario which is causing more problems. And we see it now, as Dimitri said, the people order this time earlier for Christmas. They try to increase their stock level, and this in a moment when we have already all these problems. So, and due to this, it's also very, very difficult to judge when the situation will ease.
Okay, all right. If I can also add and share with my experience talking to international customers, battery manufacturers and car makers, tier one suppliers all around the world, many of them are not very happy currently with international supply chains because of the issues which we have discussed. And sometimes I think we can be fortunate being a freight forwarder that we have a chip shortage, because many production lines are going down because of the unavailability of microprocessors. So it distracts a little bit the focus on the non-availability or late availability of cargo. But of course, I've never been in so many unpleasant conversations with carriers and with customers now compared to the last 20 years together. And hopefully the session here today can also help to, I don't want to say to educate, but to explain that it's multiple reasons and multiple impacts or effects which have resulted into the situation which we are in today, which takes me over to the last part of our session, where we discussed, first of all, the general implications on sea and air freight. We discussed and we shared experiences, what is happening to automotive supply chains. Let's now be short and precise about an outlook. Maybe we start with air freight again. And I know that you also cannot look into the crystal ball, but what do you think, Dimitri, until Chinese New Year next year, will the market, let's keep it simple, will the rates in the market go down? Will it be stable, or will it even become worse than it is today? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I can say my vision, I can share the industry say outlook, but if you look just at the say in the past, you can look at the seasonality of this circulation of the cargo throughout the year. So traditionally, as I said, September, October, November are the high and the peak season. So the rates is basically at the highest at the year end. So if we are talking about the short-term perspective before the Chinese New Year, so I believe it will be very difficult and challenging to find the capacity even for quite an expensive rate. So even though if the rate is quite high, it still doesn't give us the guarantee to be able to get this capacity. So that's why as the general outlook is just to consider whether and how what is needed to be delivered, and then start to basically work in advance to make sure that the goods are delivered in time. So as for air freight, we see that the overall situation will be the same, and the prices will start to get even higher.
Okay, that's not very promising and not what people like to hear, obviously, but thank you for your opinion. Martin, how about you?
Yeah, first, I think I have to admit that my past 5 prediction had been wrong. So Achim, let's try to predict jointly now. So which scenario do we have? We have a strong demand, number one. New capacity only coming in 2023. Weather, not predictable. The infrastructure itself, the ports will not be suddenly be larger. Yes, the demand on truck driver will not be solved. COVID situation unclear. Next typhoon around the corner. So best guess would be that it remains difficult also in the next year.
Okay, thank you. So we addressed in depth now the number one concern of the audience, where people said cost is a big concern for them. So unfortunately, it seems that it won't get better within the next 6, 8, 12 months. The second area of concern, and then taking second place in the polls, was the reliability in sea freight and in air freight. And I would like to go to you, Martin, because I believe vessels are delayed not just by a few hours, I suppose, but rather by days or weeks. And then I will ask DMITRY about the delay situation, but not only about how long is the average delay, but what are airlines, logistics companies, everybody along the supply chain, what are people doing to improve the situation that the reliability seems to be extremely bad?
Yes, of course, there is a strong interest from the shipping lines to clear this backlog, to improve the situation, because if I wait 20 days, 14 days outside of a port, it's costing money, and it's causing a lot of disruptions, meaning also a lot of work on the carrier side. So there is a strong interest. But as we have seen the latest port closure in Asia caused by typhoon, yes, caused by a hurricane in the US, it's not only the carrier who can do, he cannot influence all the situation. And also COVID will be with us maybe for a long time. Measures are taken. They are always sliding vessels to come back into schedule. They're exchanging vessels. They try to have extra loader. But this year, there are too many things pushing back, working against them. So the normal measures the shipping lines normally implement to clear, to come back into schedule, have not worked out this year, because it has never been that difficult. It has never been so difficult to predict, and so difficult, and the backlog is so big that it's so difficult to clear. And the ports, again, yes, what you can do now about ports and about missing areas to store the container on short term.
But isn't that too easy, Martin, to tell all the shippers in the world that it's the weather and it's this or that? I mean, do you know of any specific solutions, activities, initiatives that have been launched by a port, by a carrier, by a forwarder to improve that?
Of course, vessels have been derouted to Wilhelmshaven, yes, to ports which have not been used and which have not the inland infrastructure. Yes, so this has been done. Ports are left out to recover the schedule. And in the past years, when we had a situation with a bad schedule reliability, the carrier was just taking some vessels on short charter, bring some extra loader, and then cleaning up the backlog. But when you look now on the charter market, there are no vessels available. The idle fleet is also on a historical low. And again, and there we come back to the first point, when the schedule reliability is taking away 24% of the capacity, yes, this is the capacity itself is there, but it's blocked.
Okay.
So and this is very, very difficult to solve, and all the experts, everybody has a strong interest to clear this, but it's the most difficult job these days.
Martin, thank you for this. Dimitri, question to you with regards to unreliability. Is it equal bad in international air cargo?
I would not say that is that bad. I mean, we are still flying, we're still delivering the cargo, we're still making our supply chains efficient. We see some of these difficulties during, for example, handling in some of the airports. So we see that sometimes the ground time used to be like 1.5 or 2 hours for unloading and loading, but now we see sometimes in China with working in shifts. So we see that the ground time might be extended than say for 5 or even more hours. So, but eventually, we're still flying. We are making sure that the cargo is delivered. So it's not much of the delays is just several hours because of the obvious reasons, and our customers is actually understanding that and taking the understanding position. As in terms of the overall situations, how do we make sure that the system is working good? So we're actually doing the risk analysis on a daily basis. We're looking at our network. We're monitoring the situation in the airports. We see whether we need to have additional manpower here or there. Maybe we need just to stop to accept the building up and breaking down the pallets. So maybe we just transport the green channels with the BUPs, for example. So we actually looking at the network. We monitoring the situation on a daily basis, on a regular basis, seeing which problems might pop up tomorrow, and we are trying to use the predictable practice to basically in advance to see what might happen, and then to try to think about the plan B. So that's basically what we've been doing, 3 decades already, and we are quite successful in that.
Okay, that satisfies me. We get many functions here or chat messages. Martin, people don't want to let you off the hook. Okay, people are writing here. Let me read this. Okay, what can be done to improve the situation with regards to the congestions? I do understand you mentioned multiple things already. Is there anything else, any other initiative where you heard this is what's been done? And I know you cannot just build a port overnight. We can call China, they can build the hospital. Maybe we can build a port very quickly and from one day to the other. Joke aside, what can be done? It's as I said rightfully, for customers just to say, oh, there's nothing we can do about it may not be good enough. What can be done?
All idle fleet is in usage. This was never the case before. Equipment has been ordered. Yes, additional capacities close to the port to store containers are in use. Additional shifts are taken. Yes, ports like Wilhelmshaven are used more. Extra loader are used whenever available. So all these measures are there. And then we have the next incident. And we have seen it when it started also with the Suez Canal, this ripple effect. Then it's blocked, and there it was already clear that even after the Suez Canal has been unblocked, it will take more than 2-3 weeks because of these delays when suddenly 40 vessels run into Rotterdam port instead of 4, you cannot unload all.
Okay.
And we also had these times beside COVID and so on because of these larger vessels. When a big vessel with 18,000 TEUs coming to the port, you need all trucks in one go. But if you have over the week the 4,000 TEU vessels, it's a much better situation. for the truck driver, for the port, for the entire infrastructure.
Correct.
And also train capacities has not been grown that way. Yes, so we also have certain challenges on the train on the entire hinterland connection.
So I guess this isn't rather the problem is too big to be resolved by individual companies. It's more that politics needs to get involved to improve on the infrastructure. Dear gentlemen, we are coming to an end of the session. We have 2 or 3 minutes left, and I would like to ask both of you for a recommendation to our audience, knowing that their biggest concern is cost and unreliability. Starting with Dimitri and then going to Martin, is there any recommendation that you can give to car makers and Tier 1 suppliers, to their logistics and supply chain directors, or to the purchasing managers? Any message that you would like to bring across? Any wish, any request, and a recommendation? Dimitri, first to you, and then Martin for you in closing.
Yeah, thank you, Achim. That's a really difficult question to be asked. And honestly, I would say my suggestion is actually will be the same as I did on the previous session. Is just need to plan in advance. Need to basically understand what and how much you will probably need. How much of the spare parts of the equipment you need to be on your warehouse as for example in case of the emergency. So you will not need to deliver the goods as urgently. So we need to have a stock in place and to basically look at the overall operation in a more pre-advanced way, so to speak. And that's probably it. I think there is also working with the right and reliable partners who will be able to solve the problem. I mean, the situation is happening is not the good one, but as long as we have the partners who cares and who be able to be responsible and to be able to solve the questions, not to be just a party standing aside. So that's not the way to go. So the right partners is also one of the suggestions.
Okay, that makes sense. Martin, final word now to you, and then we are handing back to Peter.
Yes, first of all, also the volume prediction from the customer is very important. That the volumes the customers expecting is really shared with the service provider / carrier, and that there's a good visibility on the volumes to come. And then it's important that there is a close connect between the purchasing and the logistics department, that all the current needs are really discussed, and that it's also checked on a customer side what can be changed. We had it really very often that you start with a business and suddenly you learn about all the requirements only when you start with the first bookings. Yeah, so it's really important that the demands clearly communicated and the top issues. And finally, I would like you to ask Achim, especially you, Achim, please, when the times get better, please also get me invited. Yes, so that I not only come here with the negative news. This is really important for me.
Okay, but you guys have been sitting on the sunny side of life for the last 50 years or so. Huh? I sent a question in the chat to Peter, who is the organizer, the master of the timings. I know we are already 2 minutes over, but a question came in here from our friend Javier Martinez Girald. And Javier's asking questions with regards to greener alternative fuels in sea freight and in air freight. And this is it's a tough one, Javier. It's a very, very good question. So on top of all the difficulties which we have already, do we see initiatives to use alternative airline fuels, Dimitri, or to use biofuel? Maybe you, Martin. Anything? This is the last question we can take. Anything you can comment on alternative fuel solutions to reduce carbon footprints and carbon emissions in sea freight and in air freight?
All right, let me be the first then. So definitely the environment is the huge of importance, and we as the company, we put a lot of efforts and attention to that. Taking, for example, our fleet of air bridge cargo airlines, say most of them are 747-8, which is most fuel efficient aircraft. We are definitely looking at the ways how to look at the more efficient fuel and the more greener version of the fuel. And we also understand that we are not the producer of the machines or the engine or the fuel. but still we have some of the, say, potential moves. What we can do in order to improve our footprint is simply we can just start with a load factor, right? So if you see the aircraft is flying, so the question is how much of the cargo you are carrying there. You can fly half of the empty, so basically you are spending half of your cabin just transportation of the just pure air, which is not efficient enough. So we are looking at the ways how to optimize the space, the handling, and to minimize the our CO2 footprint. And we're also looking at the different routings, how to basically optimize and be more efficient in that. And definitely we have the separate team members who is actually looking deeper into the overall development, because we without no doubt we actually paying a lot of attention to this topic.
Thank you, Martin. Very quick answer from your side, and then it's back to Peter, and then we have to close the session for today.
Yes, so there's a very high interest on Kuehne Nagel in this topic. Yes, I would even say it's the main topic of our global Seafreight director. We already pushed for some time and offer a carbon neutral, and we have experts. And of course, we are now also looking into carbon zero opportunities. And we as Kuehne Nagel are absolutely pushing this topic, and are absolutely interested to offer this.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much. For everybody who's interested to learn more about sustainability, also reach out to DMITRY, Martin, or to ACHIM. We are members of the community. Happy to answer the questions then in the aftermath. Peter, I apologize, we are 5 minutes over, but I would like to hand over to you. But I say a big thanks and sincere appreciation to Martin and to DMITRY. And I enjoyed the conversation with you. Peter, back to you for closing.
Thank you. And a special thanks, all of you. What an absolutely great session, and also for Kuehne Nagel for sponsoring the series, because you really delivered what people wanted. How you guys do it, some people say they've got stressful jobs, but boy, I've got so many notes here of things I was going to ask you, but now next week, episode 2 within the series will be held on Thursday again at 1400 UK time. The session is on EV market projections. What's the latest outlook for electric vehicles, looking from production and sales forecasting, and the ability to accurately plan the supply chain flows. Well, having listened to what we've had today, I think from a logistics perspective, I'm just concerned that a headache that you've got might turn into a migraine. So we look forward to that. Justin Benson of Venn Digital will lead that episode, and I hope to see as many as you can. If you haven't had the opportunity to watch the whole episode, then it's will be live tomorrow. Well, not live, but on demand, so you'll be able to catch up. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you for watching us and participating, and let's all keep safe. Take care.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, it's Peter again, and thank you for watching the session. Don't forget you can connect with all members within the EV community. Send messages to each other and start to build relationships for the future. Also, take a look at our supplier showrooms. Our partners have got lots of products and services that they have to offer, which again could be of benefit to you. Make the most of the opportunity, and thank you again for joining us.